Hello and welcome to the Life Well Led podcast, brought to you by Untapped. On this show, we have conversations aimed at exploring and uncovering the art of a life well led. I'm your host, John Elliott, and my guest today is my good friend and mentor, Elliot Grudem. On the very first episode with Ryan Berg, I said that he was on my Mount Rushmore of mentors, and Elliot's face would be carved right next to his. It's played a very significant role in my life. Elliot leads a ministry he started about 11 years ago called Leaders Collective, where he curates small cohorts of pastors and church planners, takes them through transformational experiences over the course of about 18 months. I was invited through an unforeseen set of circumstances to come and participate in one of those cohorts back in 2015. And it truly was transformational. I know that's a word that gets thrown around a lot and is maybe sometimes overused, but it's the right word to talk about Elliot and his ministry and the cohorts that he creates and leads. It's one of those deals where I wouldn't want to think about my life without that experience. And what's unique and I think special about Elliot and these experiences that he leads is it's not just a one-directional thing. It's not just, okay, Elliot's a wise guy who dispenses knowledge to you as an individual or you as a group. The secret sauce, in my opinion, of Elliot's leadership and Leaders Collective as a ministry, he creates transformational communities where the growth and the learning and the transformation is happening in a bunch of different directions at once, in a way that's just rich and powerful. And so I'm excited to have him on the show, and perhaps he can explain to me and to us how he does that. So, Elliot, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me. And thanks for those kind words.
Sure. All right. Well, let's start at the beginning for you and I. It's February 2015. I've been invited to a Leaders Collective preview gathering. I'm all excited to go to Raleigh in February because I think it's going to be a little bit warmer down there. And I wake up the first morning to find snow on the ground. So that we didn't get off to a great start there. Mm-hmm. But then I come to this preview gathering, and immediately I can tell there's something different about this environment, this community. And I don't know that I would have been able to even articulate it at the time. But looking back, I think what I can say about it is I learned really fast. This, even though it was a group of, very type A, alpha male type leaders, it became apparent very quickly that this is not the kind of environment where you do your typical projecting and posturing and, subtly letting everyone know how important you are. Not only was that kind of thing not promoted or encouraged, but you could tell, that's not going to work here. It's almost like just put that away because that's not how we operate. And what that creates immediately for me was just feeling of freedom and safety. And okay, this is a place where as a leader, I can come and bring my true self, my full self, and all the insecurities and questions. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you do that. What are sort of the key ingredients to a culture where it's just, hey, we're not doing that typical posturing kind of stuff?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you felt it from the front, or from the jump, because that's what we want. And part of what we have that gives us a little bit of an advantage over maybe some other similar groups is that we don't do any advertising. We only receive potential participants by word of mouth. And so that kind of helps filter out people that are overly given for pastors. It's what quoting another wise old pastor, it kind of helps filter out the pastors that might be given to the image aspects of pastoring, where what they project is more important than really who they are. So that's number one. But then from that first gathering, we want to do everything we can to create the culture that says from the start to the very end, and continually fighting to create that culture, that kind of posturing, it's just not cool behavior. And so whether that's what you feel when you come in, or working that initial preview meeting where we have probably twice as many people as are going to actually join one of
Mm-hmm.
our groups, we try to present that in a way that anybody that's into that posturing is probably going to self-select out. And again, it's not that they couldn't be a part of it, and we'd love to work with them. We'd love to help them if they're in that struggle. But if they're 100% given to it, they're going to realize that this group is not going to be a place for self-promotion. And so from the start, they get to make a decision, because I can't force them to change, but they get to make a decision whether or not they want to take the risk and join something that may make them think differently or act differently in public as it relates to their vocation. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I as the leader of it have to be comfortable with myself.
Hmm.
So my identity has to be not in, and it's a constant struggle. But the way I phrase it for myself is my primary identity is as a friend of God. I have his friendship based on his initiation with me. Therefore, since he initiated and called me friend before I called him friend, what that means for me is that that's an identity I can never lose. And so, because of that, if I'm constantly reminding myself of that reality, it means that I don't need to walk into this room with these other pastors and prove myself to them. That then hopefully helps set the tone that that when we start, we acknowledge the awkwardness that they have coming into the group.
Yeah.
Uh, we we often say it's like coming to a middle school pool party, where the key question you're asking is, "Do I belong?" And you ask that question in different ways based on personality. And so we acknowledge that, and at the same time, do everything we can to make them individually feel like they belong. So, for example, John, and you know this, we don't give anything away with our logo on it, but we, as much as we can, any swag or whatever you want to call it that we give away is directed to the individual with their name on it, because that makes them feel like they belong rather than like they're trying to join something that's going to somehow benefit our greater cause. Um, and then we just try to get to know them. We try to be observant of them and their behaviors and their preferences, and we try to, as much as we can throughout their time with us, foster things that are directly related to them and directly related to their preferences. In a sense, rehumanizing them, letting them know that their preferences and desires matter, because pastoral ministry, like a lot of kind of leadership vocations, is a very dehumanizing
Yeah.
occupation or vocation. Everybody thinks they know you, but nobody really does. When they take issue with you, it's often not with you. It's with a decision you've made, but they try to make it personal. And there's a theological component to that in terms of calling, and you feel like you're honoring God with what you're doing. So it does have a feeling of personalness to it. Um, but you're only as good as your last performance, or at least that's what people want to make you feel.
Yeah.
Or that's a lie you're tempted to believe. And so we want to just let you know that just who you are and just your preferences, that they actually matter. And then when it comes up, we try to address it. When that posturing kind of comes up, we try to address it. And ideally, if I've done a good job of leading the group and building the culture within that group, we call it a transformational culture for the group, not just for the individuals. The group itself will start to filter it out, either through direct or indirect, or just practices. Um, why? I mean, we had a situation a couple of years ago uh, where one guy was coming in every week, and every time they got together, he would start with just kind of this self-promotive posturing, and I don't even think he realized he did it.
Mm-hmm.
But at one meeting, one of the guys said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, I love you no matter what you did last week." And I'm glad you're here no matter what you did last week. And you don't need to share with me what you did last week. You just need to come not as a performer, but as an individual. And man, I mean, like that's a huge win. And then of course we just, we pray like crazy, because there's a spiritual component to it that we can't
Yeah.
control.
Well, key phrase there. One of the guys said. that wasn't something that you had to police in that moment,
Absolutely,
but
absolutely.
there was a culture that had taken hold to where finally someone just named it and said, "Hey,
Yep.
we don't do that here."
Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And it takes time to do that. I mean, group dynamics, it takes time to build that. And most of the guys say that the experience they have with one of our groups is relatively unique, or there's nothing like it.
Yeah,
Now, again, that sounds a little self-promoting, and I don't want it to. But
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 it's a fact. I mean, I've been involved with the organization long enough. We hear that again and again and again.
yes, absolutely,
There's something different about this experience.
absolutely. And so there are moments where, I guess put it this way. Um, just about everything we do is highly intentional. We don't always have to state the reasons, and we don't always have to make it look like it's highly intentional. But it's highly intentional, and part of what we're trying to do is build this culture that where yes, eventually I'm not going to be with the group forever, and I don't want to be with the group forever. I would much rather have a self-sustaining group. And so from the start, we're trying to build these kind of culture norms within the group. And we, as you said, we view it as a success when the group calls it out rather than me have to come alongside and call something out.
Yeah, I think you're onto something when you talk about starting with you and it being important that okay, me, Elliot Grudem, I'm not the hero of the story here. Leaders
100%.
Collective is not the hero of the story.
100%.
These participants are, and in some mysterious way, that makes them not want to be the hero of the story either. That just sets this tone for, hey, it's this is ultimately not about us. It's about the group and what God's doing through this group.
Well, absolutely, and ultimately, God's the hero of the story, and so we really, I mean, at the end of the day, and I don't want to Jesus juke you or something like that, but really, what we want to do is we want to emphasize that really, if anything good happens here, it's because God moved through the group, and so, again, I don't want to be a guru. I don't want people to have to come back to me every year for some new special something. I'd much rather build in them individually and as a group uh, the character and the skills necessary to handle whatever challenge comes their way. And if it's a unique thing and they want to call back, hey, have you ever faced this? Sure, that's great. But really, at the end of the day, I want to push it back on them. I don't want to lead their church. Like that's the last thing I want to do. Um, but using the principles outlined in a variety of books, one of them that we use is Leadership on the Line. We want to build adaptive leaders, and we want to build adaptive groups. So I can't tell them everything that's coming their way in the next 5 years, um, but I want to build the characteristics skill within them in order to do that. One example that I often have told over the last couple of years. I said, hey, if in 2019 we had spent half a day talking about how to lead your church through a global pandemic, everybody would have been pretty mad at the end of that and said, I'm never going to get those 4 hours back.
Mm-hmm.
What a waste of time. And rightfully so. And yet in 2020, that's exactly what they had to do. But I couldn't give them all of the individual things that they needed to do in their church, in their context, because as you know, so much of it was state and context specific in terms of leading through that stuff. And, it looked very different from a pastor in Manhattan than it did from a pastor in, East Texas. And so, um, but I want to give them the skills individually and as a group to know how to face down that challenge and kind of differentiate between what's their responsibility, what's the responsibility of the people they're leading, so that whatever challenge comes their way, because there's no way we can anticipate what's going to come their way, so that whatever challenge comes their way, they've got the ability to do it. And that's part of that kind of, again, it's that non-competitive, non-posturing culture
Mm-hmm.
where not everybody needs to feel like they're the subject matter expert every single time, where they're the hero of it. Because you do that, you actually wind up making a lot of mistakes because there's no way you can have enough knowledge and skill to face whatever comes around the corner tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the way you put it to us. I think it was in our very first official gathering. You said, I want to help you guys lead when there are no easy answers.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's a much more succinct way of putting it.
Well, it's the way you put it. So I'm citing you. So yeah, we understood from the jump that that's important. And it's when we walk away from this experience, it's not just going to be this sort of bullet point list of nuggets that we got, but it's more of a skill. What is the process you go through to try to figure out solutions when things are complicated, when you're getting knocked around a little bit. And and there's a lot that goes into it. There's no easy answer, but I can look back on my experience and say, oh yeah, you can kind of look back and see how the whole thing was sort of oriented around that goal.
100%. And it's very leader focused because the reasons we do what we do, we just don't often know what those reasons are. And so what we want to try to do is we want to try to create a process over the year, 2 years that you're with us, where you can start to understand what are the things that you're doing well and why are you doing those things,
Mm-hmm.
and what are the things you're doing that are hindering your leadership and why you're doing those things. Because often those things are blind spots. You don't even recognize that you're doing something. Like a guy that's posturing, a guy that's coming into the group, he didn't even realize he's doing that. It's not like he's coming in and saying, I need to assert myself as the best guy in the group. It's just the way he naturally operates. And he's the only one, in that situation. He's often the only one who's not, he's the only one who's impressed with what he's saying. But I didn't realize it. So kindness and loving and kind to him is to just call it out and say, hey, this isn't actually achieving what you think it is. Um, it's actually achieving the opposite. And how can we help you? How can we help you understand why this is an instinctual reaction when you walk to this group? Um, and how can we help you bring about some change, behavioral change?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you bring up a good point about a lot of us as leaders not even being aware of some of these patterns or the why behind these patterns. And I think part of that is just the pace at which we operate, in the modern world. And I think, I'm curious if you agree, one of the key ingredients with Leaders Collective, the way that it's structured for those who are listening is, you have these sort of intensive 3 to 4 day gatherings once every,
Order.
month or two.
Yeah.
But while you're there, you're there. And so it's this sort of designated time to get on the balcony of your life and really stop and ask yourself some of those questions
Yes.
that you're not normally asking yourself. And I think there's just a lot of wisdom in that. That can come in different forms, but just finding rhythms within your year to sort of hit pause on the rest of life and step back, get on the balcony and just consider some of these things. Because I think a lot of us, the years go by and we just never stop to even ask some of those questions.
Right. It's the stuff in the. One of the ways I often put it is your church has now given you the permission to do the important non-urgent work over these
Yeah.
4 days that we're gathered together. And then it's our responsibility in leading the group to make sure that we've removed as many distractions as possible. And so, one of the things we do, and there's an intentionality to this, is we try to remove as many decisions from them as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is already prepaid, so they don't need to pull their wallet out and worry about what kind of money they're spending. Or, we try to make the facilities that they're staying in nice enough so they can get good rest and they can feel comfortable. All of those kind of things we're trying to anticipate so that they can use that time as just a directed time of focus on kind of the important non-urgent stuff in their life that's actually to pay long-term dividends. That without this, the busyness of life would eat up.
Yeah. Important, but non-urgent.
Yes.
That's a phrase worth writing down if you're listening. Yeah, that is Leaders Collective right there. And you can get away with ignoring the important but not urgent for a day or a week or a month or even a year, but you let the time start racking up where you keep pushing that stuff to the margins and it catches up with you. And I think that I came into Leaders Collective having had some accumulated stuff on that front that I needed to work through. And it's really left me with the conviction that, yeah, you got to find a way to carve out space to deal with the important, not urgent stuff, or it'll come back.
Absolutely. And that's, it's a Stephen Covey phrase. I got it way back when that
You don't
was.
have to. We won't get.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but because as you know, John, no matter what your vocation is, there are always more demands or people or situations or crises that think they have a demand on your schedule than you've got the capacity to handle. And so it's fascinating during, you know, 2020, 2021, 2022, because, if someone in the group would get COVID or a situation would require us to cancel one of our pre-scheduled gatherings. And we'd usually do it 2 days before the gathering was because it's like, oh man, I got COVID. I can't lead this thing. We need to not meet. Um, the next day, I'd send out an email. Hey, when can we do a Zoom call just to get some FaceTime with one another? And most of the guys would say, my schedule's already jammed up. So even though they had already blocked off the week and they would be out
Yeah.
of town and unavailable, once that's lifted, rather than say, oh, I've got a free week to handle the important, non-urgent, it was let the tyranny of the urgent take charge and just refill my schedule
Yeah. People
within
were
a
lined
day.
up outside the door and they let them in.
100%. That's exactly it. And so that it's a rare thing that we do that, but it's absolutely important.
Yeah. All right. Switching topics a little bit. You've mentioned several times about how intentional you are with everything you're doing with Leaders Collective and these leadership communities. One of the things I know you're very intentional about are diverse relationships,
Yeah.
which is a core value for your ministry. And that's a diversity in its different forms, you know, is a topic that different people have different thoughts about. It can be a hot button kind of thing. There can be some tokenism around it. But for you, I've seen you live it. There's nothing tokenism about it. It's a deeply held conviction about the best soil for communities like the one we're talking about. So can you talk a little bit about what that means to you, diverse
Yep.
relationships,
Yep.
and
Yep.
why it's so important?
We've put diverse relationships as one of our three core values. So it's something we're willing to actually, and Shione would say, we're willing to be punished for it in
Mm-hmm.
a sense. And I don't think we're punished because of it, because I think it's a beautiful thing, but we're willing to kind of take a hit in order to make this happen, because we think it's absolutely essential to the effectiveness of each group. And so what we're looking for is diversity in all senses in terms of socioeconomic context, uh, race and ethnicity, um, uh, some theological or denominational or network differences for these pastors.
Mm-hmm.
That we just don't want to. We don't want a group of the same guys, because when you get a group of the same guys, two things happen. It's super easy for them to default to shop talk, which is just dumb. What's the current issue within our little tiny network or denomination or group? That's not helpful. But the second thing is, it means they all have the same blind spots, and it's really hard for them to see it. But when you get a diverse group together, um, they have slightly different ways of doing things, and therefore they have slightly different blind spots that are not obvious to them. That's why they're a blind spot, but obvious often to the others in the group. And so, whether that's just saying, someone will say something and someone else will be like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That makes no sense." And he's like, "Oh, I've always said it that way," and they're like, "Yeah, like no." Or it's hey, I'm facing this challenge. I keep getting stuck, and someone that's not part of his kind of say denomination, network, group, whatever you want to say, kind of outside his immediate context, might have a slightly different way of looking at it that will really be helpful. That'll be revolutionary to the guy,
Yeah.
um, even though it's not truly revolutionary. And just kind of that different perspective is super, super, super helpful. The other thing it does is for the pastors or other leaders is it begins to help them appreciate those in their context that are slightly different from them. and to begin to value the different gifts and the different ways of looking at the world from the people that are in their church. And that can also be a very helpful thing, so that they're not only listening to those who are absolutely like them and absolutely agree with them, and therefore missing out on, I think, some of the beauty that God would have for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope what people are hearing there is that it's not a PR thing. It's not an optics thing. It's not it's 2024, so you better mix it up a little bit. The word you kept using, helpful. It's helpful. It's helpful in this way. It's helpful in that way. In terms of what you're actually trying to accomplish, creating these highly connected leadership cohorts, teaching people how to lead when there's no easy answers, having those diverse backgrounds, perspectives, relationships, it actually just helps enrich that experience.
Absolutely, and it's important in that context to make sure that it's clear everyone has equal value within the room, and that some people have areas of expertise that can be highlighted in that moment. That if we highlight that unique expertise within the group, it's only going to make the group better. And so I just, we try to do that. I'm not a musician, but it's a little bit like a good conductor that knows when to let a certain instrument play solo, get louder and let the others go down, because it only adds to the greater beauty of the whole thing. And so again, it starts from, I've got to be comfortable with myself, and being okay with people looking at things slightly differently than me. I've got to be okay not being the hero in the group, letting others highlight. Um, and then I've got to show the group and demonstrate to the group, let them actually have the experience, that there's a real benefit when everybody brings their unique perspective set of skills, just how it benefits the whole. I was at a Lyle Lovett concert about a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things I appreciate about Lyle Lovett is he travels with a large band. Lyle Lovett and his large band. And so though he is technically a country musician, it's definitely not a country music show that you get pieces of that, because he brings he brings a horn section. He's got a lights out piano player. He's got a lights out guitarist and fiddler and drummer and bass player, and multiple guitarists. And what he does throughout the show is he lets them solo. And he lets them solo as a piece of a song that everybody's playing. And in that moment, their solo only adds something to it. And so as though unique sounds, unique skills come to the front, it's actually a better show. I did the same thing with Jason Isbell with my daughter last weekend, where she said, one of the comments she made is at the end of the show, she said, part of what made this a wonderful live experience is because he allowed his other musicians to solo and be the hero for the moment, and express their unique musical skill and instrument. You get an experience that you can't get on an album. And so the live experience is actually worth going to, rather than just going to experience where some guy plays through his album and it sounds like, or the band plays through their album and it sounds like what you could listen to on a streaming service.
Yeah.
It
Well, and I
actually
think
creates a better experience.
and that's, in my opinion, so analogous to Leaders Collective, right? Because you could put sort of the best of your Leaders Collective insights into a book, a blog post, a podcast. We're trying to do it here. And people could grab some things, but it would be nothing like the live show.
Correct. That's exactly it. But again, I mean, part of what that is, though, again, we're much more facilitator than content driven. And so our facilitators have to have not only our values, of which diverse relationships are one of them, and really buy into and believe them, but they also have enough EQ and kind of group sensitivity to know when it's appropriate to allow those musicians or those individuals to solo, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's accurate to say that, when I tell the audience, here's Elliot, the leader of Leaders Collective, or the director of, a conductor would probably be the best descriptor.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
You're the conductor, and you're just making sure the right people are playing the right music at the right time so that the whole thing can grow and thrive. And yeah, I've definitely experienced that. So, all right. I want to make sure we hit on a topic that I think you're probably best known for. If we polled all the different folks who've been through Leaders Collective, and they said, what's sort of the indelible mark that Elliot Grudem left on you? I bet the thing we would hear most about would be hospitality and the power of hospitality, the power of moments. And I feel like we could do a whole nother episode on this topic, and maybe we will if you're up for it. But for today, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you uncovered that power.
Yeah.
What were sort of your seminal moments of realizing, oh, there really is something powerful and maybe even magical about these moments, about hospitality? Was there a moment that maybe you experienced that from someone? So just talk about the
Yeah.
origins of that value for you.
Yeah. I mean, a couple things kind of feed into that. I mean, number one, growing up, we always had a wide variety of people in our home for meals. And I mean, just a wide variety. Thanksgiving we had 2 or 3 solid families, and then we would pick up the people that were around that didn't have another place to go. And, my father was a seminary professor. And so oftentimes that would be people that came to the seminary from a country outside the U.S. And so finding a way to make them come in, feel comfortable, and, within that context, appreciate the uniqueness that they have. That was so growing up, that was a value. Second piece was I was trained as a journalist. And what makes a good journalist is there is almost an insatiable curiosity that you have. And so I've always been curious about people and situations, less about just really about the individual. And just, the way to write a good story when you're interviewing someone is to keep being curious till they get to a place of comfort talking about themselves, and then that's where the gold is. It's not the only thing to do, but that was super helpful. So the example of hospitality growing up, the curiosity. I've always been fascinated by restaurants, how they work, why they work, what you kind of, I love to go in a restaurant and look at the menu and kind of see if I can guess, some of the background to it. But then I don't know, maybe 15, 16 years ago, I was in New York City with a group of pastors, and there was a patisserie on the Upper East Side. It was at the time kind of the leading patisserie, one of the leading patisseries, the top patisseries in the U.S. And I was fascinated by it and just wanted to take these guys to it. I'd never been, but wanted them to be able to experience it. And so we took a couple buses, got to the Upper East Side in the evening, walked in about 8 o'clock at night thinking we'd just get some dessert. Walking down the street of the Upper East Side, it kind of had enough pretension that made us feel like we didn't belong. Mm-hmm. And then when we walked into the restaurant, it was 100% clear that we did not fit there. And just the general feeling within the first couple minutes of trying to get a table, looking at the menu, which had no information on it at all, other than like, it was an if you know menu. If you know our code words, then you'll know what to order. And if you don't know our code words, then clearly you don't belong here. The pretension was so thick in that restaurant, you'd cut it with a knife. And so though we stayed there and we had some amazing desserts, everybody had a miserable experience, and I felt terrible. And I thought, oh, there's something to be said for a welcoming environment allows a great meal to be a great meal, and an unwelcoming environment allows a great meal to be a miserable meal. So even if you can appreciate the work that goes into it and like, oh man, this is the best croissant I've ever had, or this is the best whatever type of dessert I've ever had, you don't enjoy it because you feel like they don't even want me here.
Yeah.
And talking to a restaurateur once, she said that man, most people make a decision to come back to a restaurant within the first 8 minutes of being there, which means that they've made a decision up or down on the restaurant before they've even taken a bite of the food. And so all of that kind of combines with right around that time, I'm reading a book by Danny Meyer called Setting the Table. And Danny Meyer is a restaurateur in New York, very successful. And he kind of a general summary of the way he views hospitality is hospitality is the secret ingredient to the restaurant and to business. But hospitality is a dialogue, not a monologue. And service is a monologue. Here's what we have. You're going to take it or leave it, whether you like it or not. And that's what we experienced that patisserie. But hospitality is a dialogue that kind of makes us look at you and kind of feed off kind of your preferences, your desires. What's going to make this a good experience for you? And how can we match up with what we have with you individually? What are the extra steps we can take to make this thing work for you? And so really all of that kind of came together to say, every time we interact with someone or anytime anyone interacts with Leaders Collective, we want to, as best as we can, make it a hospitable experience where we welcome the stranger in, we treat them better than they deserve, and make them feel like they're welcome and that they belong.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the key to that is that's how God treats us. He welcomes a stranger in, treats us better than we deserve, prepares a lavish feast that fits who we are and that we'll enjoy. He calls us friends. And so we want to provide that environment for everyone who interacts with us as much as is possible. Because what we think is, again, if we're looking to kind of break down those boundaries, not make it a competitive thing, make it a comfortable environment, part of what it requires rehumanizing people in a sense, which means that their preferences and desires matter, which most high-performing leaders pushed to the side a long time ago. And it's less about them and more about the challenge in front of them, and what they can achieve in light of that challenge, not are they gifted or desire to do it. And so what that hospitality does is it really creates the environment for people to engage with one another as individuals, not as performers.
Yeah. And a theme that's emerging in our conversation here is when you're trying to do these sorts of things, it has to start with you as a leader.
100%.
You can't help someone, you can't lead someone through a process of being rehumanized if you're not doing so as a human, if you're doing so as a performer. And
100%.
You've mentioned that several times in different contexts, that it's gotta, you can say whatever you want, but if you're not going first, it's not going to have the intended.
100%.
Good. Before we leave this topic of hospitality, you mentioned the Danny Meyer book. If there's someone listening who's never perhaps given a ton of thought to this whole hospitality moments thing, but is maybe intrigued, curious, and just wants to explore this further, where should they start? Should we start with the Danny Meyer book, a different book, a TV show? Where might you suggest someone start with it?
Right. It just depends how you like to learn. There's no shortage of articles that Danny Meyer has written on hospitality. His book, Setting the Table, is great. There's that I can't remember the other one that kind of is the next step from him. Extreme hospitality,
Unreasonable hospitality.
Unreasonable hospitality. Yes, thank you. Or if you just want a quick 45 minutes, watch the Forks episode in season 2 of The Bear. That really captures what it's after. Both what they do in that restaurant for their employees, and so the employees experience the value of hospitality from their leaders, the managers, the owners, the chef. So the hospitality is very much part of the employee culture, that then allows them to then spill that over to those in the restaurant. And I think that it's one of my favorite 40 plus minutes of TV that I've ever seen. And I think it captures a great, kind of a great slice of that. You can jump in with that, just that episode and catch it. If you watch all of season 2 or season 1 and then season 2, then you'll catch kind of the transformation of one of the characters in that context, which is also beautiful as well. But just even in that 45 minutes, it captures it well. And I'm sure there are no shortage of TED Talks or whatever else that people can put out there. Or I'd say the other thing is, when you go to a restaurant, think about it. What are the things that make you feel welcome, and what are the things that don't make you feel
Mm-hmm.
welcome? What
Mm-hmm.
are the subtle things the restaurant does that that works for you? What are the subtle things that don't? And then translate that to your context and cut out the behaviors that are bad and add in the behaviors that are good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you could even zoom out beyond restaurants. Just what are some environments that you feel the most safe, the most welcome, the most, gosh, I just
Yes,
love being here. And
absolutely.
get underneath the hood of that and, what are those elements? And then, how might you create those, in whatever context you might lead in?
Yeah, and it's not just
Yeah.
the elements. How are the employees responding? So, do the employees believe in the restaurant, or the employees believe in whatever organization they're at? Whatever that may be. Because again, you can't give what you yourself haven't experienced, and you can tell a lot about a business based on how the employees treat you. And if they've got a lot of pride in it, man, that's then that usually means there's some type of cultural norm there that makes them want to experience the joy once that makes them want you to experience the joy of what they're experiencing.
Um, yeah. Confessional on the Bear. Elliot had told me to watch that show for, I don't know, maybe 2 years. And I was too cheap to buy the Hulu subscription. And enough other people had also told me to watch it that I said, all right, I'll do this. And I had to call and repent of my delay there. It's definitely on the Mount Rushmore of my TV shows. And yeah, that Forks episode um is my favorite episode to tell. It's powerful, and it's a great illustration of so much of what Elliot just described there. So all right, Elliot, I'm gonna get you out of here on this last question. It's a question I've been asking each guest as we close out, and it's born out of a pet peeve I have. I listen to a lot of leadership podcasts, and you'll often hear people tell stories about different challenges they face, failures they had to go through, tensions they had to sort out, but it's almost always after the fact, and there's
Yeah,
a nice little bow tied on it with a lesson, and the guest can sort of reflect wistfully on it. But I'm always interested to know, like, what are the stories they're going to be telling 5 years from now? What are the
yeah.
things that they're wrestling with presently? How are they wrestling with it? Where is that challenging? Um, and so, to the extent you're willing, I want to pose that question to you. What's a leadership challenge or tension that you're wrestling through right now, and give us a little bit of insight into what it looks like for you to wrestle through whatever that might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one I'll probably be wrestling with as long as I do this in some shape or form. It'll be something that's always in front of me. Some of it has to do with, I founded the organization, and so for the first couple of years, everything was me, and it flowed out of me, and so to put it maybe at its core is, what is the stuff that I'm uniquely gifted in, that expressing that unique gifting is going to help not just the organization, but the people that more importantly, the people that we serve. And what is the stuff that I'm good at, but really can be transferred to others? And so it's very much a function of time. That as the organization grows, as it gets more complex, um, where do I need to be focusing my time, energy, and thoughts? And it's not just give away the stuff I don't enjoy, but are there things that I enjoy doing that I'm good at that others could do even
Mm-hmm.
slightly differently than me, but get the same results? And what are the things that I do that it's absolutely essential that I'm part of that? And I don't know necessarily there's anything in the operation of the cohorts or the operation of our gatherings that I'm necessarily essential for. But it's finding ways to transfer some of that and continue to push it out. Um, and then, I mean, again, it's so the struggle with that is, what does growth look like for me personally? where are there ways that I can just, take a look at doing stuff differently? What are bad habits that I've gotten into that have carried over the organization? And then are there others around me that can carry out these tasks that even if they're either done initially, maybe it takes them twice as long, or maybe initially 75% is good, or it looks a little bit different in how they accomplish it. We're still getting the same results, and I just need to celebrate that and just kind of let it go. But I think that's going to be an ongoing struggle.
Yeah.
Because I think the longer I'm in this, the more of that stuff, if we're going to have any lasting power and effectiveness, right? If I believe in diverse relationships, the more I can shed and let others get involved, honestly, the better it's going to be. Because again, they're going to have a slightly different perspective than I will.
Yeah, it's kind of back to that, a different version of that diverse relationships piece we talked about earlier. And I think you make a great point that sometimes those things you'll give up as a leader for the sake of stewarding growth in the organization, they may be things you enjoy doing. I think a lot of times we think of leaders just, oh yeah, I can't wait till this gets so big so I don't have to do this or that.
Right.
But some of the stuff, it's things that you're good at and you enjoy doing, but it's not where your unique value gets expressed.
100%. And I do want to say that, numerical growth or scalability is not on our metrics or success list. But there's kind of a longevity that we're pushing both organizationally and in the people we're working with. And so we want to be able to model what we think is necessary for longevity for them organizationally. So it isn't just theory that we're spitting out, and it's not, do as I say, not as I do.
Yep. Well said. All right. Well, we'll close with that. Elliot, thanks again for being on. We've known each other almost 10 years now, and I continue to learn from you. I'm excited for the folks who choose to listen to this episode to get to know you and to learn from you. And we'll be in touch about maybe circling back for round 2 on hospitality.
All right. Thanks, John.